This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi everyone, I'm Tanya.
And I'm Talia.
And we are Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Hey Talia.
Hi, Tanya.
How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. I feel like you've been gone for so long.
I was in Florida for 5 days.
I know, I missed you.
I missed you too.
So,
I missed your true crime stories.
you're going to like this one today.
Great.
And actually, for the listeners, this is one that Talia told me that she had known about. And she told me I ought to look into it, and it is a wild story.
Let's do it.
All right. On June 29th, 2003, in Altrincham, Greater Manchester, United Kingdom, so this happened in England, in the alley behind a pub, a teenage boy is lying on the ground fighting for his life. There's a pool of blood around him. Emergency workers were called. And when they got there, they found that he had been stabbed with a very large knife, probably the very one that was laying next to him. His injuries were life-threatening, and when he gets to the hospital, he's taken into emergency surgery right away. During his surgery, he actually died on the operating table twice. He ended up surviving the operation. He did lose his gallbladder, though.
I don't have mine, and I'm halfway okay.
You don't have your gallbladder? I never knew that about you.
Nope, got it removed.
So he loses his gallbladder because of the injuries. After surgery, he was moved to the ICU, where the doctors weren't sure initially if he would make it, but like I said, he does end up surviving. The stabbing had been witnessed by a friend of the boy, who had watched as his friend was dragged into the alley and stabbed by a man who appeared to be in his 20s, wearing a hoodie, black clothing, and a white baseball cap. Greater Manchester police sent out the description of the assailant, like they went to the news media right away. And the police were really at a loss as to what could have been the motive behind this crime. Luckily, though, there was a camera that was facing the alleyway from the business across the street, and that business had the CCTV footage that the police eventually end up getting and viewing. Several months prior to this stabbing incident, around the beginning of 2003, a teenager named Mark was busy on his new computer, and Mark is not his real name. If you remember, around this time in early 2003, the internet was still pretty new. Internet services such as MSN offered its users access to hundreds, maybe even thousands of chat rooms.
Yeah, chat rooms were big.
Right, and it was for any type of interest that you had. Mark was mainly interested in meeting girls, so he joined a chat room for Manchester teenagers, with the hopes that maybe he could chat with girls his own age.
How old was he?
He was 16, and he was tall and blonde, and he was very popular at school. He was on the soccer team, which is football in the UK, and he was planning on going to business college when he graduated. He wasn't a stellar student. He was an average student, but like I said, he was very popular. He found it really easy to talk to people in the chat rooms because obviously you have the safety of being behind your computer.
Yeah, you're anonymous, really.
Right, so he could easily talk to girls in the chat room. Whenever Mark would go into the Manchester teenage chat room, he would always introduce himself to anyone that had a feminine sounding username.
He's a little 16-year-old horn dog.
Right? Exactly. Soon after discovering this Manchester teen chat room, he met a 16-year-old girl named Rachel. According to her profile picture, she was a pretty blonde with long hair, and Mark was really intrigued by that. They started chatting privately, and Mark turned on his webcam to show Rachel he was who he said he was. Rachel told him she was really hesitant to turn on her camera because she had met some creeps in the past. Mark understood and told her it was okay, that they could just build their friendship first. During the weeks that followed, Mark would wait in the Manchester chat room for Rachel to arrive. Soon, Mark began to think of Rachel as his girlfriend, and they would chat with one another late into the night. Rachel would sometimes ask him to get naked on the webcam while she watched.
Wait a second. So we got a 16-year-old girl asking a
16-year-old boy
to get naked on the webcam.
Yes.
And he's like, absolutely.
He's like, of course I will. He would perform sexual acts for her.
Okay, wait. She wanted him to masturbate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he did it.
Okay.
Because he was falling in love with her. And he told her that he loved her. Rachel told him she felt the same. So there's this budding romance between Rachel and Mark.
Romance is an interesting term for what you've just described.
Okay. Soon after meeting Rachel, Mark met another new kid in the chat room. His name was John, and he was 14. Rachel introduced them because she was John's stepsister. She knew John and Mark would hit it off because they had a lot of the same interests, mostly girls, soccer, and gaming. Just as Rachel had suspected, Mark and John became fast friends. They liked the same movies, and they would spend a lot of time talking to one another in the chat room. They got comfortable enough with each other that they would both turn on their webcams to chat, and they became the best of friends.
And there's no catfishing?
There's no catfishing. John was John, and Mark was Mark. And John is also not his real name, FYI. Mark, Rachel, and John began to spend all of their free time together in the Manchester teen chat room. Mark was really dying, though, to meet Rachel in real life, but she told him she really didn't have a lot of free time. I'm not sure exactly what she was doing. Maybe work, school, extracurriculars. I don't know.
She's a very busy 16-year-old.
Yes, a very busy 16-year-old. However, Mark and John met in real life, and they seemed like an unlikely pair because Mark was tall and John was short. John was a really good student, whereas I told you Mark was average. Mark had an outgoing, easy attitude, while John was a little bit reserved and a bit of a troublemaker. And I mentioned before that Mark was popular at school. John wasn't popular. He would get teased a lot by the kids at school. They would call him names. And the other kids suspected, because John had a lot of girls who were friends, that he was gay. So he got teased about that too. While in the chat room, one day, the trio noticed a new member come on who wasn't one of the regulars. His name was Kevin McGregor, and he used a pink font to chat. He said he was openly gay, and he talked about how he had a foot fetish and also claimed that he was a stalker in real life.
Who claims that?
I know. Apparently Kevin McGregor.
Okay.
Most of the chat room members didn't pay him much attention since, as you're implying, it's easy to fake this kind of stuff. But Kevin said he was stalking Rachel and John, and he would taunt Mark with personal details that he wouldn't know unless Kevin was really stalking Mark's friends.
So is he stalking them in person?
Yes, he's claiming to stalk them in person. Mark was convinced that Kevin was dangerous, and he was afraid of Kevin. Kevin told Mark he was going to hurt Rachel one day, soon, unless Mark showed him his feet.
So this is a private conversation.
Yes. When they're in the chat room, they sometimes break off into private chatting.
And he's going to kill Rachel unless he sees Mark's feet.
Because he has a foot fetish. Mark felt really protective of Rachel because he loved her and she's his girlfriend. So he felt like he had no choice but to give in to Kevin's demands. So he complied and turned on his webcam and did whatever Kevin wanted him to do. I've read a few articles that said it went past just showing him his feet and actually was masturbation, but I'm not 100% sure. After Mark did this, Rachel was really touched by this protectiveness.
He must have told her.
Yeah, he did tell her. And they both felt that their love bond was growing stronger. They finally made plans to meet up in person. On the day of the meeting, Mark took a 40-minute public bus ride to the meeting place. He waited all afternoon, but Rachel never showed. Disappointed, but convinced that something must have happened for Rachel to miss their meeting. He went back home, and as soon as he got there, he ran up to his room, turned on his computer, and was hoping there was a message from Rachel explaining why she stood him up. But instead of finding a message from Rachel, Mark saw he received one from Kevin. His heart sank. Kevin told him he had kidnapped Rachel, And then he described in detail how he had Rachel gang raped before he murdered her.
Wow.
Right? Imagine getting that news.
I would assume that Mark would go to the police.
He did not go to the police.
Of course not.
Spoiler alert. Kevin told Mark that he kicked Rachel in the stomach. He described some of the things he did to her, like he had held her head under ice water. He described to Mark how Rachel was crying and was crying out for Mark while all of this was happening.
Why is he doing this? Why is Kevin doing this to poor Mark? He showed him his feet.
I know. I know, right? I guess Kevin's just a psycho. Kevin also taunted Mark by saying how he wasn't there for Rachel, like to save her in her last moments. But Mark told himself that he couldn't possibly have been there for her because he didn't even know where she was. Mark grieved for Rachel, and his grades just took a nosedive. John also mourned for Rachel. The two of them found solace in each other. Mark didn't go into the Manchester teens chat room as much as he used to after Rachel's death, but when he did, his objective was again to talk to girls. Soon he met a girl named Lindsay. Mark confided to her how he lost Rachel, and she consoled him at the loss of his
beloved
chat
room friend.
Soon, Mark and Lindsay's chats grew more personal, and they began to flirt. It didn't take long, but Mark became interested in Lindsay and thought that she felt the same for him. Like his relationship with Rachel, Mark would turn on his camera for Lindsay and do sexual things for her, but she didn't turn on her camera.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm rolling my eyes. There was not video chatting and webbing when I was a teen, but I'm pretty sure at 16 I didn't want to watch a guy jerk off.
I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have either, and I don't even want to see that now. As an almost 50-year-old woman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. However, we're not shaming those that do.
I'm not shaming those who do, but I don't want to go into a chat room and find some stranger and ask him to do that, so I'm just saying. Lindsay revealed to Mark that she was a junior secret agent for the British Secret Intelligence Service, or more commonly known as MI6.
Really?
Yeah, which is similar to the CIA here.
Oh, okay.
She's a junior agent.
That's believable.
Isn't it? Mark ate it up, though. Mark had really enjoyed James Bond movies in the past, and James Bond worked for MI6. So he was excited to meet a real, live, honest-to-goodness spy. Lindsay confided in Mark that the real reason she joined the Manchester teens chat room was because John was being protected by the government. John, the 14-year-old, Rachel's brother. Lindsay told Mark Kevin was targeting John, and she hoped that Mark could help her in tracking down Kevin. Within a few weeks, Mark received an email from Lindsay. It explained that if he was receiving this email, that meant Lindsay had been killed in action.
Lindsay's dead too?
Lindsay's dead. She told him from beyond the grave that since she had failed in the mission, Mark had to continue it for her. Mark continued to go to the Manchester chat room to look for Kevin. One day, Rachel suddenly appeared.
Rachel! From the grave?
From the grave. Mark was over the moon that she was still alive, but
Hallelujah!
Like, oh my God, what happened? But his elation soon took a turn for the worse. Rachel told him that she had been held captive, and she had been in a coma, and she'd recently given birth to Mark's baby. This really confused Mark because, as you're probably thinking, Mark and Rachel never met up in real life, and she had only been missing a few weeks.
Yes, please explain this.
Mark was just perplexed and didn't understand what the hell was going on, but before he could find out, Rachel disappeared once again, as suddenly as she reappeared. So he never got the answers to that. Like, what? Mark again spent a lot of time in that Manchester chat room, hoping to either find Rachel again or find Kevin so he could keep Lindsay's dying wish for him to continue her mission. He didn't see either Rachel or Kevin, but met a new person named Janet Dobberson. Janet was an older woman who typed in all caps. She said she was about 40, and she soon sent Mark a private message. She said that she was a member of MI6.
Another one.
In a higher position than Lindsay was. She actually said she was the number 3 person at MI6. In her chats with Mark, she told him she was married, but was still very sexy, and that she worked as a real estate agent as her cover. Believe it or not, Mark was suspicious.
What? Why would he be suspicious? This sounds so legit.
Janet told him in one of the private messages that the leadership at MI6 was very impressed with Mark because he obviously could keep a secret, and they wanted Janet to recruit him. Mark at first didn't believe all that Janet was telling him, but he decided to continue chatting with her to see what would happen. She told him he was secretly being tested by MI6, and if he were to pass their tests, he would be paid millions of British pounds for his service. He would travel the world, and he would meet important world leaders such as Tony Blair, who was the current prime minister.
Don't you need parental permission to have your child go and be part of the MI6?
You would think, right? Janet also told him he would be able to meet the Queen.
Nice.
The more Janet chatted with him, the more it all began to make sense to Mark. He believed all that she was telling him, and even though it seemed too good to be true, Mark accepted her offer to be recruited.
I was going to say, I will join MI6.
Yes, I'll join MI6.
If the Queen wants me.
Janet told him he would begin his training for MI6 in London, but before he would be sent there, he had to complete a top secret assignment.
Oh, shit,
here it comes. Once he completed this assignment, he would be given his agent number, like you know how James Bond is 007, and he would be given a license to kill.
Oh!
So I don't know if it's an actual license you carry in your wallet, but he was going to get this license to kill. Do you want to know what the top secret assignment was?
I cannot wait.
You're going to love it. It was to be the bodyguard for a very important Manchester teen named James Bell. Even though Mark was assigned to be his bodyguard, Janet stressed that he couldn't let anyone know he was on this assignment, including James. So he kind of had to be his bodyguard, like incognito.
So this is outside the chat room. He's got to physically guard a guy named James.
Yes. Mark wondered to Janet why James' security was so important to the British government.
So important. They're putting a 16-year-old boy on it. I just want to point that out.
Yeah. Janet told him she normally wouldn't tell him why, but she got the proper permissions from her higher-ups, which included the Prime Minister, just FYI. Tony Blair.
He gave it to her.
He did. She confided in Mark that there was a safe at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean that contained 568 billion British pounds worth of jewels.
Wow, holy shit.
And only a few countries actually knew that this safe even existed. But the Queen of England was the only person in the world who knew the combination to the safe. Well, she and James Bell, which she had given the combination to.
I'm so...
It was at this point where Janet confided one more secret to Mark, that James Bell was really his good friend John.
Oh.
Mark was ecstatic. Guarding John would be a breeze. Mark was anxious to begin his top secret assignment, so he called John and asked him if he wanted to hang out after school. And they went to different schools, just to let you know. John went to a private school and Mark went to public school in Manchester. John accepted immediately because he was really excited to spend time with Mark. Thereafter, Mark and John spent all their free time together. Mark took his assignment very seriously, and he would report back to Janet of his activities with John. She was pleased with his progress, but warned him that other agents were watching him to make sure he was completing his assignment. To prove to Mark that she wasn't bullshitting about that, Janet told him a few of the places and dates and times of the meetings between Mark and John. Mark was a bit unsettled to find out that he was being watched, but was also kind of excited about it, believing he was carrying out such an important top secret mission.
What was he going to do if someone did attack John?
That's a good question.
Karate chop him?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Did he think of that part?
I don't think he ever thought of that part. I mean, he didn't have any weapons. It's not like Janet was like, oh, go pick up your gun at the bus station or something. No, he had no weapons. It's a very good point. While Mark was performing his bodyguard duties for John, he would sometimes get John to skip school with him, and they would spend the entire day together. However, John's school called his mother one day to tell her that he had left school early. Since John wasn't home, she wondered where was he and what was he up to. She checked his laptop to see if she could find anything out, and that's when she discovered a message from Janet, and she got really worried about him. She eventually found John at Mark's house, and she was very upset. Mark's parents decided to also search Mark's computer, and they found messages to him from Janet as well. Their parents, being obviously much more savvy than the boys, warned them both about online predators, and both were banned by each of their families from having any further contact with Janet, and they also imposed a ban on them of using their computers.
Both boys?
Both boys. However, teenagers are very sly.
Yes, I know. I was one once.
And they ended up being able to find a way around their parents' restrictions, and both John and Mark went back to frequenting the Manchester Teens chat room. Mark was contacted again by Janet and given another assignment that she said was a matter of national security. She stressed to him that if he didn't complete this very important assignment, she would be fired or possibly killed. You want to know what the assignment was?
Of course, I need to know.
Before I tell you, we're going to take a break. Mark's mission was to prove to MI6 that John was gay. She told him the only way he would be able to prove that John was gay was that Mark would have to perform oral sex on John. Mark was confused, and he really didn't want to perform this mission, but Janet reminded him of its importance and that she could possibly be killed, and that John was being watched at all times.
And Mark's really into girls, right?
Yes.
So, okay, he's not...
No, he's not gay. He's into girls. Janet made him reconfirm his commitment to joining MI6, which he did. When Mark completed this assignment, he told Janet what happened. He had spent a weekend at John's, and he and John had watched porn together. During this, they performed oral sex on each other. Janet was very happy with Mark. He had passed his initiation, and to celebrate, he was going to meet the defense secretary and Tony Blair.
Wow. All that for just sucking a dick.
Right? Janet told him he would get a gun, 500,000 British pounds cash, and his license to kill. Mark was stoked, but Janet soon grew serious in their conversation and asked him if he thought he could kill someone in the line of duty, even if it was someone close to him. Mark thought about it for a moment and then told her he could. And Janet said, "Are you sure?" And he insisted, "Yes, I could kill someone for the government." That's when Janet gave him his first official mission. It was an assassination. She told him he was to assassinate his best friend in the world, John, a.k.a. James Bell.
Wow. That's pretty hardcore.
Right? Mark's world just spiraled out of control. With that mission, he couldn't believe it. He hadn't even completed weapons training yet, and now Janet wanted him to kill his friend. He couldn't wrap his head around it at first and remembered all the James Bond movies he'd seen. Usually the spies were killing bad guys, villains, not their friends. Mark then had a thought. Maybe Janet was just joking, right? She's got to be joking. When he asked her, she assured him she most certainly was not joking and told him, again, the country was depending on him to assassinate John. She said that after he completed the mission, this very, very important mission, he would then receive 80 million pounds, an employee contract with MI6, and sexual favors from her.
Whoa. Bonus.
I know, right? I mentioned before that Mark really struggled with this assignment because John really was his best friend. His moral compass was just going off. He asked Janet, was it murder, what she was asking him to do? She told him, not in this case. In this case, he was doing his duty for his country and the crown. However, to help ease his mind and his internal strife, she told Mark that John had an inoperable brain tumor and he was going to die anyway.
Then why don't they just let him die?
I don't know. That's a good question, Talia. You're asking all of these important questions. Mark was still very hesitant to go forward with this mission, but his worry was all for nothing. Because a few days later, Mark and John were chatting online. John told Mark he had just gotten a letter from his doctor that told him he had a brain tumor which was inoperable. Mark realized that Janet was telling the truth. The news of John's brain tumor, while it made Mark sad for his friend, he realized that killing John was comparable to a mercy killing. It was then when Mark made the decision that he would carry out this assassination. On June 28, 2003, MI6 formally welcomed Mark into its ranks of the Secret Service, apparently over email though, because there was no formal ceremony. He was assigned agent number 47695. Mark was anxious to complete his first mission and planned to meet up with John on the following day. He spent most of June 28th talking to Janet and working out all of the details of the assassination plan. It was decided that Mark would buy gloves and the knife that he was going to stab John with. He was going to buy that later. However, despite chatting online with Janet and planning everything, Mark was still confused as to how he was supposed to exactly carry out his mission. He said to Janet something like, "What am I supposed to do? Just walk up to him on the street and stab him to death in Town Square?" Janet told him to do it somewhere quiet and to tell John he loved him before he did it. She also told him not to call an ambulance right away, but instead stay nearby, and Janet would meet him at the crime scene disguised as a police detective to make sure he wasn't arrested. Janet gave him an abort code. It was 6969.
Clever.
I know. And was instructed that most likely it would come from a loudspeaker, though. If he heard that the day of the planned assassination, he should immediately stop the mission. The next day, June 29th, 2003, John was really excited to see Mark waiting for him in Altrincham at the specified meeting place and had a wide grin for Mark when he saw him. Mark and John spent some time shopping in Altrincham. Specifically, they went to a store where Mark let John pick out the knife he would use to kill him. Of course, John didn't know this, didn't know why he was buying the knife. But John picked out a 16-inch chef's knife that was used to cut through large cuts of meat.
16 inches?
16 inches. Mark's resolve about the mission faltered a bit during that afternoon as the day wore on. He was desperately hoping to hear the abort code and was on pins and needles throughout the day in anticipation. He eyed everyone he saw on the street, wondering if they were MI6 agents who were sent to watch him carry out his duty. At one point, determined to finish the mission, and remembering Janet's instruction to carry out the assassination somewhere quiet, Mark took John into a patch of woods that was nearby, but panicked, thinking that he wouldn't be able to hear the abort code if it was announced, especially if they went too far into the woods.
The abort code that's going to go over a speaker?
Yes. Coming back into the little town, Mark noticed an alleyway and thought it seemed like the perfect spot. It was quiet and seemed not to have a lot of people around. Also, Mark was positioned somewhere he thought would be ideal in case the abort code was announced. During that afternoon, Mark had thought maybe this whole thing was just an elaborate ploy, a test for him, and he would be stopped at the last minute. And maybe he wouldn't actually have to go through with killing John and still be able to prove his loyalty to his country. But he hadn't heard the abort code and the day was wearing on, and Mark knew it was time to carry out the plan. He led John into the alleyway. He pulled out the knife and told John what he was about to do. Mark looked John in the eye and said, "I love you, bro," and plunged the knife into John's chest. As he did so, he felt the knife go into John's ribcage. John fell to the ground and begged Mark to call an ambulance. Mark knelt next to him and said, "Shh, people are going to hear. Please be quiet." "You've killed me." Mark hugged him and told him, "Don't say that. Don't let that be the last thing you're saying." As they're laying on the ground in the alleyway, Mark realized one stab wasn't going to kill John. So he dragged John up into a standing position and whispered, "Trust me," then stabbed John again in the abdomen. The knife went through John's kidney and liver. Mark lowered him gently to the ground. As the blood pooled around John, Mark waited to call emergency services, just as Janet had instructed him. He waited to see if Janet would show up, but after several minutes, he decided to call for the ambulance and thought for sure that that would alert Janet that his mission was complete and she would come to the scene to tell him what to do next. As police arrived to the scene, Mark wondered which detective was Janet, but she didn't make her presence known. He told the responding officer that he saw a man in his 20s, wearing black, with a white baseball cap, stab John. Having no good leads to go on, police went to the media and Mark's description of the supposed assailant. I mentioned the CCTV footage at the start of this episode, and like I mentioned, the police were anxious to see what was on the tape. When they did, they saw Mark and John enter the alleyway, and after 25 minutes passed, they saw Mark appear at the start of the alley, making the emergency call. There was no assailant, and no way the camera could have missed the man Mark described. From what I understand, the other side of the alley was like a drop-off, so there wasn't like another access way or a street or anything like that. It was a drop-off.
So no one could get to the alley through there.
Right. There was only one entrance in and out. The police were convinced Mark had stabbed John. Mark was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of John. During his police interview, he of course denied any involvement and kept the fact he was a secret agent to himself.
Wasn't Janet supposed to help him?
Yes, Janet was supposed to help him. I don't know where she is.
Where the hell is she?
She is not showing when he needs her.
That's a surprise.
The court refused to grant him bail, and he was put in a facility for juvenile offenders. John eventually recovered, and as soon as they could, the police questioned him. He initially told police that he wasn't stabbed by Mark, but once the police confronted him with this CCTV footage, he broke down and told them Mark had stabbed him. I don't know why he was lying for Mark. Or maybe I do.
You know why.
During Mark's incarceration, he was convinced that Janet was going to show up any minute to explain everything and he would be released.
He needs to let that go now.
Girl, after a month passed, he finally, with no sign of Janet, confessed everything to the police. They were dubious of his wild tale of undercover spies, sunken treasure, and orders from the Queen.
Well, yeah.
Despite this, they did believe that Mark believed the story he told them. Police searched Mark's computer, and in their search for Janet, they found sexually explicit videos of Mark that he had sent to several of his contacts. And initially, they feared he was somehow involved in a pedophile ring, and that he had been targeted and groomed by members of the ring. In addition to the video, police found over 57,000 lines of text to review from the numerous chat room conversations he had. After the enormous task of reviewing the chats was complete, police determined that Mark had been in contact with 6 separate users in the Manchester chat room. These 6 users each had individual backstories and distinctively separate chat mannerisms, including language they used and the like. Eventually, the forensic computer scientists that reviewed all of this information found that 5 of the 6 users had misspelled the word maybe. It was spelled M-Y-B-Y-E. Could it just be a coincidence that 5 separate people in the same chat room all had the same misspelling for maybe?
I think not.
I think not. It was clear to police that all of the 6 personalities were created by the same user. The personality they were most interested in was of Janet, and when they discovered that Janet had also been in contact with John, they analyzed his computer too. The police found someone had logged onto John's laptop using Janet's login and password, and so they knew that someone who had physical access to that computer, like someone in John's family, would have been the only person who could have hacked in. Police then began to look at who was at home in John's house when Janet was online, and on June 28th, the day before John was stabbed when Mark was making all the plans with Janet, there was only one person home at John's. That person was John.
That's just so messed up. It's so messed up.
Isn't it crazy?
What the hell?
Police confronted John with this evidence, and he unloaded quite a tale to them.
Oh, jeez. What does he have to say?
Oh my God. Listen to this. He told them that he had found comfort in going online and meeting other teenagers in the area and chatting with them. He had few friends in real life and was bullied often at school. He soon developed an addiction to the computer chat rooms and barely left his computer when he wasn't in school. Like literally, he even forgot to eat dinner. His parents noticed this and tried to break him of his habit by taking his laptop and disabling the internet, but whenever he was home alone, or even when everyone was asleep, John snuck online. One day he entered the chat room using the username Rachel_West, impersonating beautiful blonde teenage Rachel. That's when he met Mark, who believed Rachel was real. Mark developed an emotional relationship with Rachel. He was falling in love with her, like I told you. And when Rachel introduced John to Mark, John found someone who actually wanted to be his friend. As someone who had few friends and was the victim of bullies at school, John's friendship with Mark became the most important thing in John's life.
Well, that's kind of sad.
It is kind of sad. He realized he couldn't come clean to Mark about making up Rachel because he was sure Mark would hate him and stop being his friend, especially when Mark would realize he was masturbating and John was watching and not Rachel.
Yeah, that would be a deal breaker.
Over the course of the weeks and months since they met, John began to fall in love with Mark and became jealous of the love that Mark felt for Rachel. That's when he made up Kevin McGregor and then had Rachel killed off.
In a brutal way.
Right. He had to get rid of her.
Do you have to get rid of her like that? Gang raped and all this horrible torture?
I know. It reminds me of like a soap opera. I know. Couldn't he just said like she got in a car accident or something? No. He wanted to have what he felt was the perfect boy, Mark, all to himself. To keep Mark interested in chatting, John created all of the aliases to talk to Mark with. And when he felt like Mark was becoming bored or losing interest, he would just create another one. John lived in constant fear Mark would discover his ruse and would stop being his friend. He was also kind of floored that Mark seemed to believe all the crazy shit that he came up with.
As am I.
Especially when some of it wouldn't add up. Like when Rachel came back into the chat room, for example.
Pregnant with his baby.
Right. But regarding Mark not catching on, the forensic computer specialist for the police defended Mark, saying even she was fooled by John's elaborate personas. She said that each style of conversation was totally different, and she was fooled for a while. She couldn't find any mistakes that John made in the conversations, and sometimes it would be a week or a few weeks before a character came back into the chat room. She said, quote, the continuity of his memory was phenomenal, end quote. As John continued to string Mark along, he grew severely depressed and suicidal at the ruse.
Because he knows he can only do it for so long.
Right. Unable to come clean to Mark and falling deeper in love with him, John created Janet Dowerson and plotted his own murder.
That's just so...
Isn't that crazy?
Insane.
I know. I can't get over it. Wanting the last words that Mark said to him before he died, John made sure to have Janet tell Mark to tell John that he loved him before he died. John was arrested in this case.
John was arrested.
He was the first person in the United Kingdom to be charged with incitement to murder himself.
Wow.
I know, right?
Incitement.
It's like assisted suicide to me. It's almost like assisted suicide.
Wow.
But it's incitement to murder himself. The first time that Mark and John were able to see one another since the near-fatal stabbing was in court on May 28, 2004. It was almost a year later. They were not given the chance to talk to one another, though. Mark pled guilty to attempted murder of John. John pled guilty to incitement to murder himself. The judge in this case had this to say about Mark and John. Quote, schooled writers of fiction would struggle to conjure up a plot such as that which arises here. It's staggering to be dealing with a case that arises out of a 14-year-old boy's invention of false personalities, false relationships, and events arranged for his own killing at the hands of a 16-year-old boy who he had met via an internet chat room. End quote. The judge had sympathy for Mark's extreme gullibility. And for his age, the judge felt that John was very smart, genius even. The judge believed, Mark truly believed, he was working for MI6 and had been manipulated and used by his supposed best friend. The judge also believed both boys had a very high probability of rehabilitation, and if this had been a normal case, which obviously it's not.
It is so not.
The penalty would definitely include some jail time. However, this wasn't an ordinary case. John was given 3 years probation and was banned from using all online chat rooms. He was only allowed to use the internet under strict supervision during his probation. Mark was given 2 years probation and also banned from all online chat rooms. Both boys were forbidden from either having contact with the other. Today, it's believed John is successful and happy. He's living with his partner and a pet pug.
In a what?
Pet pug dog. A pug?
I thought it was like he's living with. Okay, yeah. He's living with a pet pug. Okay,
and
I'm
his
sorry.
Partner. I couldn't find out what actually happened to Mark, though. And I searched. But
I'm still surprised that John survived 2 stab wounds to the abdomen with a 16-inch knife.
I know. And to let everyone know, the sources I got for this episode, there was a Vanity Fair article that was quite lengthy. And also there was a Casefiles episode that I got a lot of the information that I used.
Oh, seriously, a messed up story. That is so crazy.
I know. That is my story of Mark and John.
Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome. Before we go to Leah, did you want to do our new segment, Review the Reviewer?
I have been waiting to start this.
Awesome. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I've got some good ones here that people left for us. This one is from Podcast Republic, our friend Matt. Matt gave us 2 stars. He said, "It's like true crime being read to a kindergarten class." I wish in my kindergarten class someone read me these true crime stories. You know what I think? What? I think Matt had a crush on his kindergarten teacher. And I think he has a crush on us. That's why he gave us 2 stars. But I am going to have to rate Matt's review. I'm going to give it 5 stars because it made me laugh. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. You're probably not listening to us anymore, but if you are.
What do you got for me?
I have a review, a lovely review from Spencer. Spencer says, "What they liked about us was, you two keep it fresh and entertaining, and I get excited every time I see there's a new episode. You two work very well together and each provide something amazing to the show." And they gave us a 5-star review, so I give Spencer's review also 5 stars.
I concur.
Because I love it.
That is awesome. But Andy over at Podcast Republic, you would disagree with Spencer. Do you want to know what Andy said?
I would love to know what Andy says.
Andy gave us a 1 star. He said, quote, "They don't come across as analytical lawyers. They come across as 2 women gossiping at the hairdresser."
Frankly, I would want to hear that type of podcast.
Me too.
I don't want to sit and listen to an analytical lawyer.
We listen to that shit all day.
Exactly. So sorry, Andy, but I'm going to go with the hairdresser attitude because that's fun.
And I'm going to give him 5 stars. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
Asshole.
I'm going to do another one from Apple, and it is a 5-star review. This one we just got on March 16th from Baby Blues TX. And this person says, "OMG, I've loved y'all forever. I love hearing about cases I've never heard, but I also love that y'all don't shy away from the gore."
No, we don't.
No, we don't. I guess I'm desensitized because nothing bothers me. Keep it up.
She's dead inside.
Just like us.
Just like us. I gotta give her 5 stars.
Absolutely. 5 stars all the way. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you all.
That's the end of our Review the Reviewer for this episode, but tune in next week because we'll have more.
And congratulations, they all got 5 stars.
They did. And I just would like to remind everyone before we say goodbye to subscribe or follow on whatever app you're listening to us on.
Then you'll get weekly updates about our weekly releases.
You can go to our website, tntcrimes.com, to find out more about our episodes. You can find out information there on how to become a member, or you can go to patreon.com/tntcrimes.
You should join us. You'd love it.
You'd love it. There's extra episodes. There's full-length episodes, mini episodes.
We have some shout-outs.
That's right. We do have shout-outs.
We do.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Malia.
Thank you.
Ashley.
Thank you.
Loretta.
Thank you.
Tanya.
Thank you.
Candace.
Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you.
Kathy.
Thank you.
Deanne.
Thank you.
Kim.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you.
Jacob.
Thank you.
Olivia.
Thank you.
Beth Ann.
Thank you.
And Ursulita.
Thank you guys so much. Seriously.
Thank you, all of you.
I think that's it.
I think that's it. So
we've got IG and Facebook at Hardcore True Crime. Anything else?
No.
Well, I want to thank you, Tanya, for your excellence in podcasting.
Right back at you, babe.
Thank you. And thank you guys all seriously so much for taking the time to listen to us.
Until next week.
Don't kill each other.
Bye.